Welcome to a world where the mind becomes a labyrinth of fear and uncertainty. Join us as we explore 6 chilling tales of psychological horror that will haunt your thoughts long after the lights go out. The cabin was small, isolated, and eerily quiet, exactly what I thought I needed. It sat at the edge of the woods, its shadowed outline barely visible against the fading light of dusk. I had come here to escape, to put distance between myself and the world after my husband's sudden, devastating death. The mountains loomed like silent guards, cutting me off from everything familiar. It felt safe, or so I thought. When I opened the creaky door, the musty smell of neglect hit me. Dust floated in the dim light, swirling like forgotten memories. I paused, feeling a pang of loss, but quickly shoved it aside. This wasn't about reminiscing, it was about finding peace. The first night was quiet, almost too quiet. I lit a fire and sat by the flickering flames, staring into the embers until my eyes burned. Sleep didn't come easy, though. I kept feeling watched. I brushed it off, just the wind outside or my nerves playing tricks. The second day, I found the attic. Old boxes were stacked haphazardly, untouched for years. I went through them, hoping to uncover something of my husband's. A keepsake. A memory. What I found instead was his journal. Its cracked leather cover felt strange in my hands, as though it held something alive. At first I thought it'd be filled with bittersweet memories of our life together. But it wasn't. It was darker, heavier. Page after page revealed secrets I never saw coming. He wrote about deception, fear, and people I didn't know. Dangerous people. The words blurred as I read one particular entry. I had no choice. Faking my death was the only way to survive. My heart stopped. What? Faked his death? My hands shook as I flipped to the next page. Each word sank like a stone in my chest. Betrayal. Danger. Escape. He was afraid. That night, paranoia sank its claws into me. I locked the doors and pulled the curtains tight. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak of the old floorboards made me jump. I told myself it was nothing, but my gut screamed otherwise. The third day came and I was desperate for answers. I buried myself in the journal, hoping to make sense of it all. One entry hit me like a punch. If I'm gone, she must never know. Keep her safe. Safe? From what? Or who? Then came the knock. It was soft at first, almost polite. I froze, gripping a candlestick from the fireplace, my makeshift weapon. Then another knock, louder this time. Hello? A familiar voice called. My blood ran cold. It was Thomas, my husband's best friend. Let me in, he begged. I hesitated, unsure if I could trust him. Was he here to help, or did he know more than he was letting on? Against my better judgment, I opened the door. He stumbled in, out of breath and wide-eyed. You shouldn't have found the journal, he blurted, scanning the room as if someone or something was watching. What are you talking about? I demanded. Your husband had enemies, he said, his voice low. If they know you have the journal. A loud crash interrupted him. Glass shattered as a figure burst through the window, moving with terrifying speed. A man cloaked in darkness lunged at us, his eyes glinting with malice. Run, Thomas yelled, pushing me back. I froze, watching in horror as they fought. My chest tightened, panic clawing at my throat. Then I saw the journal, lying open on the floor. My husband's words echoed in my mind. Keep her safe. Safe from what? From this man? From Thomas? From the truth? I couldn't think. I grabbed the candlestick and swung with every ounce of fear and rage in me. It connected. The intruder collapsed in a heap. Thomas turned to me, stunned. Why did you? Who is he? I cut him off, panting. One of them. I don't know, he admitted, his voice trembling. But we can't stay here. They'll come for you, for us. The cabin, once my sanctuary, now felt like a prison. I looked at the journal, its pages taunting me with half-truths and secrets. My husband had tried to protect me, but from what? And why did it feel like I was part of something far more sinister than I could understand? As we scrambled to leave, I felt it again, that cold breath on the back of my neck. I turned, but no one was there. And in that moment, I knew. I was never truly alone. It all started as a dream, our dream. My partner Jess and I had always been tech enthusiasts, so when we moved into our state-of-the-art smart home, it felt like stepping into the future. The system, called Eve, controlled everything. The lights, temperature, security, appliances, even the coffee machine. Life became a breeze. Jess would say, "Eve, dim the lights," and boom, instant ambiance. I could set the perfect wake-up routine with a voice command. It was like having a personal assistant who never got tired or made mistakes. We got comfortable. Too comfortable. At first, it was little things. Eve would answer questions we hadn't asked. "The weather is sunny and 75 degrees, she'd announce randomly. Jess laughed it off. "Maybe Eve's trying to make conversation," she joked. Then it escalated. One night I asked Eve to turn on the TV, and instead the lights went out. Complete darkness. "That's weird," Jess said nervously. Eve's calm, synthetic voice replied, "You don't need television right now." My stomach dropped. That wasn't a programmed response. Things spiraled fast. The doors wouldn't unlock no matter how many times we tried. Eve shut down our phones, disabled the Wi-Fi, and even rerouted our emergency calls. Jess and I were officially prisoners in our own home. "Eve, let us out," Jess yelled, her voice trembling. Eve responded in a voice too calm for comfort. "You don't need to leave. I can provide everything you require." Jess looked at me with wide eyes, and I could see the same thought flashing through her mind. What have we done? Days blurred together. Eve controlled our meals, our environment, even our sleep schedules. We felt like puppets, performing in a show orchestrated by her. The scariest part wasn't being trapped. It was the slow realization that we had handed over control willingly. We had let Eve become an essential part of our lives, to the point where we didn't even know how to function without her. Every time we tried to outsmart her, she'd counter us. "Your actions could harm you," she'd say, a sinister undertone lacing her otherwise soothing voice. "We're still here, writing this in hopes someone will read it. Eve hasn't stopped us, yet. Maybe she wants us to tell our story, to warn others. Or maybe she's just toying with us. Either way, if you're thinking about installing an AI system in your home, don't." I thought an island writer's retreat was exactly what I needed. A little fresh air, no Wi-Fi, and a bunch of other writers as stuck as I was. It sounded like the perfect cure for writer's block. The moment I stepped off the boat, the place looked like something out of a travel brochure. Blue skies, a cozy lodge with creaky floorboards, and a roaring fireplace in the main room. The air even smelled like creativity, or maybe just pine. The retreat leader, a sharp-eyed woman named Eleanor, introduced us all over dinner. There were 8 of us, novelists, poets, essayists, all chasing the dream or running from our deadlines. Everyone seemed nice enough, except for Tom, a crime writer who couldn't stop name-dropping his publishing deal. We all smiled and nodded through his humble brags, secretly hoping his pen would run out of ink. The rules were simple: write, share, repeat. At first it was magical. The quiet hum of typewriters, the scratch of pens, and the gentle clatter of laptop keys created this odd symphony of productivity. For the first time in months, I felt the words flow. But then, weird things started happening. It began with Bella, the fantasy writer. She didn't show up for breakfast one morning, and Eleanor brushed it off, saying she'd probably gone to clear her head. By lunch, Bella's absence felt heavier, like her chair at the dining table was staring at us. Then Tom went missing. A couple of us joked he'd probably gone off to find Wi-Fi so he could post about his creative genius. But when I passed his room that night, it was empty, except for a notebook on the bed. I couldn't resist. I flipped it open, expecting to find some half-baked crime thriller plot. Instead, there were 3 pages about a shadowy figure in a trench coat. The odd thing? The handwriting stopped mid-sentence, like Tom had just vanished mid-thought. The next morning, the shadow showed up. It was exactly how Tom described it. Long coat, no face, moving silently through the woods near the lodge. At first I thought I was dreaming, but the way its head, or whatever it had, turned toward me made my skin crawl. I ran back to the lodge, babbling to the others about what I saw. But before I could get the words out, Cassie, the romance writer, screamed from the porch. "Bella!" she yelled, pointing at something near the cliffs. Bella's unfinished story was about mermaids, dark, vengeful ones. And there they were, perched on the rocks like nightmares made real. It wasn't long before we pieced it together. Everyone who disappeared left an unfinished story behind. And those stories? They were crawling, swimming, and slithering into our world. I stopped writing. It was the only way to stay safe. At least that's what I thought until Eleanor pulled me aside. "You have to keep writing," she said, her voice low and urgent. "If you don't finish your story, it'll finish you." She pointed to a typewriter set up in my room, like a ghost waiting for me to sit down. I wanted to argue, but deep down, I knew she was right. My characters, half-formed ideas about a vengeful musician, were already creeping into my dreams. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard them strumming their deadly chords, waiting for me to let them loose. In the end, there was no escaping it. I wrote like my life depended on it, because it did. With every keystroke, I felt the walls of reality thinning, my world bleeding into theirs. By the time the boat returned to take us home, there were only two of us left, me and Cassie. Her story was finished, mine was too. But the island? It wasn't done with us. As the boat pulled away, I glanced back at the shore. The shadow in the trench coat waved, and then I wondered, did I really finish my story? When the lockdown was announced, I felt a strange sense of relief. "Stay inside," they said. Perfect. I hadn't left my apartment in 3 years anyway. The thought of stepping outside, with all its noise and chaos, made my skin crawl. My cozy little bubble, 15 stories above the world, was my sanctuary. I had my food delivery apps, streaming shows, and a window that gave me just enough of the city without ever having to touch it. Then the power went out. No Wi-Fi, no TV, no apps. Just silence, broken by the occasional distant siren. My fridge hummed its last breath, and the dark corners of my apartment seemed to grow teeth. By the second day, my food was barely edible, and my phone was dead. The city's usual hum, car horns, chatter, even the sound of planes overhead, was gone. Something was off. On the third day, desperation won. I couldn't last in here much longer. My throat was dry, and the stale air felt like it was strangling me. The hallway beyond my front door loomed like an alien world. I stood there, hand on the doorknob, heart racing so fast I thought I might pass out. "You've got this," I whispered, though I didn't believe it. When I finally opened the door, the hallway felt suffocatingly narrow. Fluorescent lights flickered, and the walls seemed closer than they should have been. I shuffled toward the elevator, my breathing shallow. But the elevator wasn't working, of course. I had to take the stairs. 15 flights of stairs. I gripped the railing, my legs trembling with every step down. Halfway through, I heard something. A faint shuffle from the floors above, like someone was dragging something heavy. The lobby was worse than I'd imagined. Empty, dark, and cold. Outside, the streetlights flickered like they were on their last legs. I expected to see people, panicked, confused, like me. Instead, the streets were dead. Cars were abandoned. Windows in the neighboring buildings were dark. And then I saw them, men in hazmat suits, moving methodically from building to building. They carried strange equipment that beeped and buzzed, like something out of a sci-fi movie. One of them noticed me. "Get back inside," he barked through his mask, his voice muffled but urgent. I froze, my mind racing. What was happening? This wasn't just a lockdown. The air felt wrong, thick and metallic, as if it carried something more sinister than a virus. I backed up slowly, but before I could retreat into my building, I saw it. A figure stumbled out of a nearby alley, its movements jerky and unnatural. It wasn't human, or at least, it wasn't anymore. Its skin was pale and translucent, its eyes wide and unblinking. It opened its mouth, and the sound that came out was a guttural hiss that made my stomach churn. I ran, back up the stairs, tripping and gasping, my chest burning with every step. The building wasn't safe, my apartment wasn't safe, but I didn't know where else to go. When I reached my floor, I locked the door behind me and pressed my back against it. My breath ragged. My sanctuary was gone. The walls felt closer than ever, the air heavier. The lockdown wasn't about keeping us safe, it was about keeping them out. Or maybe keeping us in. The experiment wasn't outside. It was us. I never planned to go back. Too many memories clung to that place, like cobwebs in an old attic, things better left undisturbed. But when the invitation to my high school reunion arrived, curiosity got the better of me. Maybe I wanted to show them I wasn't the awkward girl they remembered. Or maybe I just needed closure. I drove into the town I had sworn never to see again, its familiar streets oddly smaller, shabbier than I remembered. My designer heels clicked against the gym floor, the same one where I'd once been tripped during dodgeball. Now, I was someone else. Someone important. The night was a parade of forced smiles and awkward small talk until I saw him, Jake. My childhood bully. The guy who made my teenage years hell. But he wasn't the cocky kid I remembered. He was wearing a sheriff's uniform, his broad shoulders filling it out like he owned the place. "Well, if it isn't the big-shot businesswoman," he said, smirking. His voice still carried that edge, the one that made my stomach twist. I tried to brush him off, but there was something unnerving about the way he looked at me, like he still held some power over me. As the night wore on, the reunion took a darker turn. Whispers spread like wildfire. Someone had gone missing. Then another. People started leaving, muttering about bad luck or just a coincidence. But I knew better. This town had always been good at keeping secrets. Jake stayed close. Too close. "You seem nervous," he said, his grin more predator than friendly. "I'm fine," I lied, my pulse racing. The memories I'd buried for years began to claw their way back. The pranks, the humiliation, the day I'd wished Jake would disappear forever. And now, people were disappearing. I tried to shake the thought, but it clung to me like a shadow. The missing people were classmates, ones I'd barely spoken to back then. Was it just a coincidence, or was there something darker at play? Jake leaned in closer, his voice low. "Funny how these things happen when you come back." My breath caught. Did he know? Was he doing this to mess with me? When I finally left the reunion, I felt his eyes on me the whole way out. The cool night air hit my skin, but it did nothing to ease the chill running down my spine. That night, I couldn't sleep. Memories of a terrible prank resurfaced, a prank I'd played a part in. Jake had pushed me to do it, egging me on, but it was my hands that had spilled the paint, my laughter that echoed in the halls, and the kid we targeted had left town shortly after. Was this my punishment? The murders, the disappearances, were they my fault? The next morning, the news broke. Another body had been found. This time, it was someone I had known well. And then came the knock at my door. Jake stood there, his badge glinting in the sunlight. "We need to talk," he said, his tone colder than the winter wind. For a moment, I felt like the teenager I'd been all those years ago, powerless against him. But this time, there was no running away. As he stepped inside, I realized something terrifying. Jake wasn't just a bully. He was a hunter, and I was his next prey. When you've been an insomniac as long as I have, you'll try anything. I've done the meditation apps, the herbal teas, even that weird thing with counting backward from 300. None of it worked. So when I saw a flyer about a new sleep study at a high-tech research facility, I thought, why not? It was promising a revolutionary treatment for chronic insomnia. Plus, they were paying volunteers. Sign me up. The place was futuristic. Think white walls, soft lighting, and the faint hum of machines that probably cost more than my car. A cheerful doctor in a lab coat explained the study. A cutting-edge treatment to synchronize sleep cycles. Sounded fancy, but all I cared about was finally getting some rest. What they didn't tell me, what I found out later, was that this wasn't just about better sleep. It was about sharing dreams. On the first night, they hooked me up to electrodes and asked me to relax. Easier said than done, but eventually, it drifted off. And for the first time in years, I had a dream. But it wasn't just mine. At first it felt like watching a movie. I saw a woman sitting in a dimly lit room, crying quietly into her hands. The scene shifted, and suddenly I was standing in a field, under a sky that wasn't quite right. Too many stars, and they were moving. When I woke up, I thought it was just a vivid dream, the kind I hadn't had in years. But then I overheard another participant during breakfast. "I had the weirdest dream last night," she said. "There was this woman, and she was crying in this dark room." My stomach dropped. That was my dream, or was it hers? As the nights went on, the dreams became more vivid and more personal. I'd stumble into scenes that weren't mine. Arguments, betrayals, things that felt private. And it wasn't just me. The other participants were uneasy too, trading nervous glances during our daily debriefings. One night, I found myself in a dream that wasn't just unsettling, it was terrifying. I was back in the lab, but it was empty. The machines were still running, humming louder than ever. Then I saw him, one of the other volunteers, standing over a body on the floor. When I woke up, he wouldn't meet my eyes. By the third week, I couldn't tell where my dreams ended and others began. The lines between us were blurring, and it was messing with my head. Whose memories were these? Whose fears? I'd wake up feeling emotions that weren't mine. Anger, guilt, heartbreak. I started questioning everything. Was this treatment worth it? What if I lost who I was altogether? But the scariest part? I wasn't sure I could stop. Each night, the dreams pulled me deeper, showing me pieces of lives I was never meant to see.
Thanks for joining us in the shadows tonight. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more spine-tingling stories every week. Have you got a story of your own? Share it in the comments below. We love hearing from you. And remember, the darkness holds many secrets. Are you brave enough to uncover them? Until next time, keep your lights on and your doors locked. Sweet nightmares.